My name is Rolf Olson. I'm from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Poetry has been a very important part of my life for probably the last 30 years or so. I've been engaged in a poetry group called the Unabridged Poets for at least 20 years. Wow. So we have a monthly meeting where we each bring a poem, share the poem, listen to comments, and plan revisions around the comments that we get. It's really non-judgmental, but a lot of fun. And I really enjoy listening to all the poems that the other poets bring, in addition to have some reaction to mine. I would say probably about 30 years, but I came about it sort of through the back door. That is that I was really into furniture and boat building. So I had notebooks. And what ended up happening was I would, every once in a while, write down little thoughts between my sketches of furniture pieces or other designs for jewelry, something like that. Over time, basically, there got to be more words than designs. And it was very organic, very subtle, and very unconscious. Sure. You know, there was never a time when I said, okay, I'm switching from graphic design or object design, functional design, to poetry. But it just sort of built. So I have about 30 notebooks filled with all sorts of things. And then in 2000, I had a friend who wanted me to fly with her out to the Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Festival. She didn't like flying, so she asked if I would fly with her. And I said, sure. So we went out there and spent 4 days at the Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Festival. And almost any poet of note was there in attendance and reading. So I got to meet the last 5 poet laureates of the United States. You know, I mean, it's really a fantastic venue. It used to be held at a historical village. Now, I'm not sure where they're holding it these days. But it was really tremendous learning experience. One of the men that I saw was a former poet laureate named Stanley Kunitz, who is now dead. But I remember sitting in the audience in this big circus tent. Stanley came in. He was on the arm of another gentleman, walking very slow with a cane. He walked down the aisle. He climbed up on the podium. He hung his cane on the edge of the podium. He grabbed it in his hands, and he suddenly got really big. I mean, not physically big, right, but his presence. And then he began to read. And that was the time in which I said to myself, there's magic here. And it was wonderful. So, and he's a very small, short little man. I think he was like 95 or so when I saw him. But he had powerful poems and just a really fantastic reading style. So that really got me going. Well, a lot of the ones that I met out there, Billy Collins, Naomi Shihab-Nye, then Sharon Olds, who was just an absolutely devastating poet. I mean, she just knocks your socks right off. Stanley Kunitz. And of course, I do read lesser known poets. I don't just stick with those. I have a very extensive poetry collection filled with books by people up here in Wisconsin in general, and then across the nation. I haven't gone as far as rap yet, but at this moment, that's an interesting possibility. One of the phrases that has always been foremost in my mind about poetry is that poetry is an act of awareness, of empathy, and imagination. That, to me, really encapsulates the essence of poetry. The language of poetry is mostly evocative. I mean, the idea, I think, at least for me, is to get an idea and then start brainstorming that idea and write down as much as possible. Phrases, just a huge big mass of stuff, and live in the emotion of the idea. Then once you've got that down, then you can go back and sort through it and arrange it in a manner that might be a little more coherent than otherwise, because on the page it's kind of a jumble of stuff, but you combine little phrases here, so it's sort of like, for me, a brainstorm. I really enjoy it. I have recently taken up blacksmithing, so now at this point I'm spending much more time blacksmithing than I am writing. But now I've started writing poems about blacksmithing.
Sure.
And about the tools that you use, and that is fun. It's really a challenge to, write a decent poem about an anvil,
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the famous blacksmith poem from the past, but it's a way of inhabiting for a time something else. And just exploring its characteristics, its content, and its perspective. Well, mostly through me. Initially, when I first published the books, I started taking them around to places and people wouldn't stock them. I went to Barnes & Noble and a bunch of places in Green Bay, and they just simply said, we won't stock these. Right. But I have my first chapbook called One Glass Eye, published in 2003 by Music to Ears Press. And my most recent one, a much more substantial book, even has a binding on it. It's called Riot at the Poets Cafe, which was 2015, from Music to Ears Press too. And I have a smattering of poems that will be collated and gathered into another book upcoming. That may be about tools and techniques as an artist and a craftsman. Because I spent my life as a boat builder and a craftsman, 40 years worth of working with tools, with my hands. And so it's a challenge to turn that into poetry. So that's what I'm endeavoring to do at this moment. But I also have lots of other things. I'm a photographer, and I drive a school bus for the local school district, and then I'm a blacksmith demonstrating at least 4 days a week out at Heritage Village. Oh. So even though I'm semi-retired, I am well occupied. Well, because of my schedule with the school bus and everything else, I can't drive around a lot. Then summer times come and I'm blacksmithing. So, right. And before I got started and moved to Sturgeon Bay here, I lived in Egg Harbor. And I was the resident manager at a hotel called the Ashbrook Suites. And that meant I was there every day from the time we opened in the spring until the time we closed at the end of Christmas time. I had to be there every single night. I just didn't have the latitude to be able to go places and spend time overnight. So I have always felt sort of withdrawn, in a sense, from the poetic community. I'm always thrilled when Wisconsin Public Radio or NPR has a Poetry Month special with an author. It's just fantastic to hear the perspectives of various poets. Everyone is so different and so unique. I am very appreciative of the community up here because I think we have a thriving community of poets. We also have a lot of programs that are available. I am just not able to take advantage of them the way I would like.
Sure.
But that will only last for so long, and then I'll be able to get in more deeply and more significantly. All right, so this is a poem from childhood. My grandparents had cottages in Waupaca, central Wisconsin, lovely lake. So this is about, as a child, on Rainbow Lake in the chain of lakes in Waupaca. It's called Geronimo. As kids, we would, as often as we could, play with the battered Grumman canoe, take it out between the dock and the raft, tip it over and slip underneath. The outside world would disappear, our legs like pale stalks, waving, extending down into the eerie green depths, shot with shafts of sun, clear to the top of the weed bed. We were always uncertain about what might lurk down there, just above the bottom. Coupled with the prop whine of passing speedboats, our voices would sound alien and echo in our special private chamber. Sometimes we would miss the shout of "Geronimo!" from the cottage porch, but we always heard the stumpy lumbering run down the wooden dock and the flat slap of the dive, and we knew Uncle Bob was coming for us. Coming from somewhere below, a pale green hand reaching up for us. So my dad had a sailboat. We kept it in Fish Creek, and we would sail a lot up here. So this is a poem about a trip on the sailboat down between here and Milwaukee where we stored it. It's called Coastwise. Fog and flat calm, no wake, barely way. Standing on the bow pulpit, I stare down into the green, wavering glass. I toss the lead in a long, heavy arc and wait for the boat to run up to it. Clear to 30, I call. The fog is wrapped tight, while the engine complains about idling under load. I coil, toss, and wait. Clear, coil, toss, and wait. Every minute or so, always watching the glassy sheen ahead, when out of the green depths a pale, ghostly shape emerges, big as a house. Rock, I yell, and 2 seconds later we bounce our keel hard twice, and it's gone. Back to green, no bottom. My heart is pounding, and I'm left staring. The fog is thick. The water is glass. So now here's a funny one. Line violation. I was pulled over yesterday by a well-versed muse. "What were you doing in the express line?" she asked. "Actually, I was musing," I replied. "Ha," she barked, "very funny." Okay. I was searching for a word. "You know you can't do that there. You block the flow of real poets. Words get backed up all over the place. Take out your wallet." I showed her my poetic license. "Aha," she says, "attempts." She asked if I had any chapbooks in the car. Less than a dozen, I replied. Well, show me your ISBN registration. And her hand went for her pen as she stepped back slightly. I know it's here, I said. It's not something I use every day. Right. No real poet would say that. I know, I said. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write you a warning. I want this on the record. It's going to cost you a chapbook, and I don't want to see you in the express line again. She handed me the warning, stuck the pen behind her ear, turned and walked away. I looked in the mirror. God, she had stanzas. Another one about sailing. My dad got the 33-foot sailboat when I was, I'm guessing I was 10 years old. So we would go sailing around Door County here. So this is a poem called Passing the Helm. Beating into a stiff breeze, gusting at least 40, the whitecaps are blowing off a rising head sea. My dad and I are heading north after the winter layup. I'm sitting high on the weather side, feet braced across the cockpit, hand tight on the tiller, feeling it push and pull with unaccustomed strength. Don't fight it, he says. Let her work within 10 degrees of our heading. You're doing fine. I think I'll go below and whistle up a pot of coffee. And he was gone. I could see him below through the companionway at the gimbaled galley stove, putting the battered pot on to boil. I saw him light his pipe. The puff of smoke over his head trembled momentarily before being snatched out the hatch by a blast of wind. I could hear him whistling between the gusts and the regular staccato bursts of spray off the weather bow. Below my feet, along the lee rail, the water ran strangely smooth, spilling its hiss into our wake. The boat was alive with the sound of rope and sail. In the wood under my hand, the forces of wind and water argue like siblings, and I am using their content to drive us home. All around the storm is raging, and I am on the helm. This is a short one about creativity, because people always ask me as a poet, what's creativity and what's it like for you? Yeah. So this is my answer. It's called Run of the House. That damn monkey strikes again, swinging down out of the canopy of my consciousness with a shriek of glee on a thin thread of thought, and lays a strange and beautiful fruit at my feet, then vanishes with swift precision into the deep, dark silence where he busies himself with the cultivation of the unique and extraordinary. Bless him. How is it with you? So my name is Rolf Olson from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and I hope you all go searching for some poems that you haven't read yet and find one that really excites and enlightens you.